All right, everybody, today looking at these word problems we're going to turn into linear equations. One of the things I want to make sure you guys know, and I wrote this down and you guys can just kind of copy it into your notes if you want, but we're going to have to make decisions on when we use slope-intercept form. And we're going to use this form when we're given a rate of change. And oftentimes you would never recognize a rate of change or a slope in a real life situation. Like, you're not going to just recognize something as a slope or rate of change because no one calls it that. But you will notice that there's lots of things in life that are slopes, and you can always figure those out because most often they're given the word per in it, like dollars per hour. I make $10 per hour. They're telling you the slope is 10. That's our rate of change. Or if you hear the speed limit is 30 miles per hour, that's a slope. That's a rate of change. Or if you're talking about miles per gallon, like gas mileage, anytime you hear the word per, that's going to be your code word to look for to know that this is a problem. We're going to use slope-intercept form because it's telling us the slope. And also it's going to have to give you a starting amount, some initial amount, some beginning amount, something to begin with, because that's what our y-intercept b is. So when I read this first problem, it talks about Evan. He's going to the county fair this weekend. So far I can't tell this is a slope-intercept form problem. The admission to the fair is $5, so I know my starting amount is $5, but I still don't know this is a slope-intercept form. And the cost per ride. And so now that I see this word per, now I know that this is going to be probably a slope-intercept form equation. It says the cost per ride is 50 cents. So one of the things I just make notes of is I make notes of what I know. I know that the word per is my rate of change or my slope. And so it says cost per ride is 50 cents. And I could use like 50 and then the cents thing, but since we're talking about money, 50 cents is probably going to be written as $0.50. And so I know my slope is 50 cents, again, because of that word per, and that my starting amount of this equation, the starting amount was, just to get into the fair, it was $5. So I know my slope and I know my starting amount. If I keep reading, it talks about how his parents gave him $20, and we're going to talk about what that $20 means in a minute. But then it says write and solve. So it kind of gives us two different directions. Write and solve a linear equation to find how many rides he's going to go on. So we're going to eventually find how many rides we can go on for our 20 bucks. But before we do that, we're going to write a linear equation. And because we know M and B, we're going to write these in slope-intercept form. We know our goal is to write it in y equals mx plus b form. And since I know the m and the b, I can just take those letters and just replace them with what I know their values are. So y equals 0.50. Again, that's 50 cents. The x must stand for the rides because it's 50 cents per ride. So I just got to keep in mind that that x is going to be the rides, plus my starting amount. And the starting amount in this one was 5. And so I start to get the sense that this is my linear equation that I'm going to use to solve this equation. So when it says write a linear equation, that's the linear equation we're going to write. And then we're going to use that linear equation to solve a problem. And this problem we're going to solve is if he gave him 20 bucks. So we have to make a decision. Where does this $20, this $20 right here, where does that $20 go into this equation? Is it the y value or the x? Sometimes they'll give you the y, sometimes they'll give you the x. It'll be your job to figure out which one is which. And the easiest way for me to think about it is just to think about what this 50 cents per was. Since it was 50 cents per ride, I know that this stands for 50 cents per ride, so x is the rides. And so if this told me I wanted to ride 20 rides, I would put the 20 in for x. But it doesn't say 20 rides, it says $20. So I know that must not be my x, instead must be my y, because this is talking about total cost. And so when I go to solve it, instead of y equals, I'm going to put 20 equals. I'm going to replace that y with 20. If it said the parents gave him $40, I would write 40 equals. 20 equals 0.50x. I'm just going to copy that equation, plus 5. Knowing that x stands for per ride, or x stands for rides, and it wants to know how many rides I'm going to go on. So now at this point, I'm just solving a two-step equation. Here's my x. I have to get rid of a times 0.50, and I have to get rid of a plus 5. We always start farthest away. So we're going to get rid of the plus 5 by subtracting 5. And it becomes a fairly straightforward two-step equation. 15 is equal to 0.50 times the amount of rides I'm going to take, so it's 50 cents a ride. To figure out how many rides you can take, you're going to have to divide out that 0.50 or that 50 cents. And you can take your calculator and do 15 divided by 0.50. And what you're going to end up with is x is equal to 30. So in the end, I know that I'm going to end up being able to ride 30 different rides. So it says write the equation. That's the written equation. Then it says solve. This is it solved. So I end up with two different answers, the equation and the solution. All of these are going to have kind of that same kind of setup to them. Biggest thing we can say is when you're looking at problems and you're not sure, and this is kind of set up easy because you know every one of these ones are going to be slope-intercept, but eventually you're going to have to be able to make those decisions. Is this slope-intercept? Is it standard form? Should I write it in point-slope form? So I'm going to keep coming back to look in the problem. Does it give you the slope? Does it talk about something per something? And does it talk about a starting point? And so when you look at number 2, I'm going to look for those key things. I'm going to look for that word per. I'm going to look to see if there's a starting amount. So as I read it, it says, while visiting Crimson Lake, Sally decided to go kayaking. The rangers charge $8.50 per hour. If you don't notice that word, these becomes a little bit harder. But as soon as I notice the word per, I know what my slope is. I know my slope is $8.50. So now I'm going to keep looking to see if it gives me a starting point. Does this one tell me how much I start with? And so I keep reading, in addition to a $25 deposit to rent the kayak. A deposit's money you have to put down up front so you don't steal it or something. If you don't come back, they don't give you your money back. But if you come back, they give you the $25 back. So there's going to be an upfront cost of $25. And because it's an upfront cost, I have to pay it at the beginning. The deposit, I know that's my starting amount. So my B is $25 or $25. It says if she rented the kayak from 11:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., we'll come back to why that's important. Write and solve a linear equation. So again, it's asking us to do two things, write an equation and solve an equation. And when we're done, it's going to help us find the total cost to rent the kayak. Because it gives us the slope and the y-intercept, we're going to choose to use slope-intercept form with the y equals mx plus b form. And we're going to plug in what we know. We know the slope is 850. And it's 850 per hour. So now I know that x stands for per hour, or for how many hours, plus my starting amount, which was 25. So if the first part of the thing said write an equation to model this, there's our equation to model it. Now we just got to do some solving. So I'm going to go back and read this again to figure out what I need to solve. If she rented the kayak from 11:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. So why would they tell us that? From 11:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. If I think about how many hours that is, 11:30, so then it's to 12:30, 1:30, 2:30, that would be 3 hours. So I know that she rented that kayak for 3 hours. I have to think, is that a number I could plug into this equation? Remembering that this is 850 per hour, I know x stands for hours, so I can plug that 3 in for the x. So I'm going to go solve this. Y equals 850 per hour, but now I know how many hours she rented it for. She rented it for 3 hours plus the $25. As I continue, I look at this. Y is already solved. It's already by itself, so I just have to see if I can do this math. If I can do the math, I'll just do it. Now let's grab my calculator and do 850 times 3, and then I'll just add the 25. So you grab the calc, and you're just going to do 850 times 3, just doing that right there, plus 25. Now I just use the times. You could also use the parentheses if you want it to look just like it. 850 times 3 plus 25, either way works. Now remember, this is money, so if I said, well, 50.5, that doesn't really make sense in money. I've never seen 50.5 written that way as money. If I'm thinking about it as money, it's probably $50.50. So try to make sure you put the context in it, that it's the $50.50. So those are the things that we want to look for. We want to look for the per word, and we want to look for the starting amount, and then use that to create the equation, and then figure out what information they give us, and do I put it in for y or for x. Make sure it makes sense why on this one I put the 20 in for y, and why this one I put the 3 hours in for x. Make sure you go back and try to get that point if you didn't see it. That's where I think a lot of students get stuck with, is what goes where. And so just kind of make sense of it. If you're ready to try number 3, try number 3. If not, just know there's another video for that one, and then you'll be left trying number 4. If you have questions, of course, let me know. That's it.